although long gone from the modern view, could one of these animals hold the key to human evolution? Here are 8 extinct animals that science has since tried to bring back to life. Welcome to One Away. Make sure to watch this video, as we speculate the reasons these animals went extinct, and what science reveals about their links to humanity. Tyrannosaurus Rex. So long as life began, there has always been a food chain. Since the dawn of prehistory and the revolutions that came after, humans have evolved to rise in this food chain. But in the history of science fiction, if there's an animal that can turn that food chain upside down, it's the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Known to the world as the T-Rex, if there's an extinct animal more fantasized, it's most likely this one. After all, it's had 65 million years to make its legend known. The most famous feats, of course, have been the most talked about in films like Jurassic World, and games like Dino Crisis. It can take down 500 pounds in a single bite. And of course, it was designed for maximum crush action. Even the first of the fossils, discovered by Barnum Brown in Montana, was said to have the size of school buses. You'd think that given all this fascination with the T-Rex, more fossils would have been found. Today, the fossils have only reached a number around 30. But, as scientists know of, to bring back a Tyrannosaurus Rex is close to nil. Besides that, there's the reason that what we can probably replicate are those within the span of 10,000 years and such. And, that to head back 65 million years is almost a dream. Then again, if these were true, a Tyrannosaurus Rex in the works, the hierarchy of power would change. The apex predator. In the annals of history, it's been known in Greek as Smilodon, or chisel and tooth. It has 3 times the strength of the modern lion. And, it was known by humans before and after as a compact, kill machine. This, of course, was the sabre-toothed tiger. This long extinct animal made itself known as a predator 10,000 years ago. And it had an impressive target list, which included mammoths and bison. Of course, a good number know that it went extinct sometime across the Ice Age. Since then, over 2,000 fossils of the saber-toothed tiger have been found in the La Brea tar pits of Southern California. Which is good news for scientists and fans of this animal, since the fossils likely contain substantial DNA. That said, not one has attempted to replicate it. After all, those fossils contain the blueprint of an apex predator. The greatest, the duck, the flock. Aside from predator birds, some extinct birds are a rarity in the field of extinction science. Take for example the great auk, a penguin gone extinct for over 170 years ago. They habituated more in the northern hemisphere, Canada, and Scotland. Turns out, humans have been at the hunt for these penguins since prehistoric times. Even in the 17th century, most of them were hunted for food and oil. The last of the great auks was shot in Iceland back in 1844. The Longnow Foundation, for example, would love to bring these great auks back. In fact, some research has been made with over 80 stuffed auks in museums to sequence their DNA. But then there's the dodo, which went extinct over 300 years ago. For the dodo, it's been different. It was hunted by natives of the Mauritius Islands. This was mostly because it was historically considered awkward and dumb. Basically, it was convenient food for the natives and for the Dutch colonizers who gobbled the last of them in the 17th century. And since the Mauritius Islands didn't keep a great set of fossil records, it's been hard to bring the dodo back. One set of birds that seem to have taken the spotlight are the extinct passenger pigeons. These were birds said to have made their name across millions of flocks, and they filled up the skies of America. They were known as the most social of birds in the history of the country. But they went extinct over 100 years ago. This was in the 20th century, and the reasons were the constant hunts and further degradation of their habitat. The last of these passengers was called Martha, and died in Cincinnati in 1914. Fortunately, scientists all over had been hard at work to bring back these birds. And though the data seems a hit, some are wary if band-tailed pigeons could really serve as the surrogates for these newborn passengers. The band-tailed ones sing differently and make differently too. The jury is out on this one. The Last Bucardo. This goat, known as the Pyrenean ibex, was labeled extinct over a decade ago. This animal, known as Bucardo in the mountain regions of Spain, had been unfortunately thinned out via repeated hunts. By 1989, only a dozen were left, which included Celia, or the Last Bucardo, who was tracked by wildlife vets. Unfortunately, Celia was killed under a tree back in 2000. Given the recent extinction, it made sense for scientists to bring them back in 2003. They used Celia's frozen skin samples and made 439 eggs with her DNA. The result? 57 developed into embryos, 5 survived full-term pregnancy, but only 1 was born. Unfortunately, the clone had a lung complication and died in the arms of the scientist. This is a shame to many fans of goats. A reminder once again for the wildlife that has, before it's too late. Behemoth sloths. Extinct animals offer quite an interesting perspective compared to their modern counterparts. The giant sloths, for example, are close to the more scaled-up elephant than they are to sloths that we see today. They were at the cusp before the agricultural revolution, around 10,000 years ago. They weighed up to 4 tons, and they had incredible claws. To think, they even once roamed the New World, from Cape Horn to the Arctic Circle. And they are observed and studied today to understand the DNA needed to replicate a giant sloth. As impressive as these giant sloths are, scientists don't have any good reason to think they're useful, aside from a tourist attraction of giant rodents and people. Josephosaurus wasn't a type of bacteria or plant. In the annals of history, it was a giant rodent that lived around 2.4 million years ago. A paleontologist from Uruguay identified that it was around 10 feet long, from the nose to the tail, and weighed around a ton. Which is not a surprise, since it has a cousin in the capybara, which has its home in South America. Most scientists say that even if it had many cousins to replicate some DNA from, the scale was problematic. Turns out, there's not many giant hamsters to act as rodent mothers. Plus, as a society, rodents, as we know, can often get a bad rap. If you can envision this giant rodent today, it would probably scare people, since it had supposedly fought even the iconic sabre-toothed tiger, back in the day. Host's eagles. A particularly extinct set of eagles that were available in New Zealand, Host's eagles isn't really on top of the list, when it comes to extinction. These eagles have been extinct for 500 years. And there are probably 3 reasons for it. The first is scale, which is considerable, since these extinct eagles weighed at around 9 foot long. The second is food preference, which is what scientists believe in. Host's eagles were said to prefer emus, but in particular, the moa, which weigh around 300 pounds. That's what the moa were until the Maori tribes arrived in New Zealand and drove them to extinction too. So, the first and second reason is quite understandable. Without the moa, the Host's eagles wouldn't have enough sustenance to maintain themselves. The third reason is cultural. To many in Maori legend, these eagles were infamous for their preference to kidnap children from their people. In many cases, Host's eagles as an animal had to leave. Aurora of the Aurochs. It's been extinct for over 400 years, but if there's an animal that is worth all the beef, it's the legendary Auroch. An auroch is the long-dead ancestor of the modern-day, domestic cow. You can picture a cow that had features of a bull. Some of these aurochs were even featured in a film from 2012, called Beasts of the Southern Wild. Although the film mostly called for the potbelly pigs with nutria skins, which is tolerable since these animals don't exist anymore. Compared to others though, these aurochs could have continued on. But it was the 17th century, and those span of years were plagued with all kinds of disease, a disruption of habitats, and a fair amount of hunts. Since then, scientists have had many attempts to bring it back. There's even a European coalition plan called Project Tauros, to reverse engineer the auroch via selection breeds. This is referred to as a back breed, and scientists in Poland know that even if it can't bring back the auroch, it can make for an animal that has a 99% compatibility. Since, compared to other animals, aurochs have well documentation, the likelihood is high. And even more the case, it's important. Since humans discovered domestications, humans have had a stable animal source in the cow. Compared to a pig, that has been rendered in the Bible as unclean, due to its appetite for anything. And though chicken is not unclean, it's very poor in the conversion of whatever it eats to high amounts of nutrition. The cow though, because of its stomach, can convert even food unfit for it, into nutrition that is bioavailable for human digestion. It's a miracle that makes cows quite different from other domestic animal food sources. To paraphrase John Durant of the Hunt Gather blog, a cow can power a wolf pack. So, imagine the nutrition an auroch-like cow that has a superior conversion rate of foods. Humans themselves could probably evolve.